I'm starting. May I have your indulgence? All right, now this color is a very complicated subject. There are a number of theories, and they all contradict each other. There are some people who say that blue, red, and yellow are not the primary colors. There are other primary colors. I'll go into that later on. But I'll give you what I think is a good enough foundation to be able to navigate for a while. Anyway, this lecture won't do you a bit of good unless you have some understanding of values. Because values and color go together. They're very critical. In fact, in the French Academy, you study from CAS for about 5 years, and then you study drawing from life in black and white. And after 10 years, your instructor looked at you and said, son, go into color. And he didn't tell you a damn thing about it. He just said, son, you're ready for color. Go ahead, paint in color. The guy knew from nothing. Trial and error. But their drawing was so good, and their values were so good, that even though they used the wrong color, it still looked good. See? If the value is right, the color will look good. You can paint a green face. With the right value, it will look all right. Now, there's no such thing as muddy color. If the color is muddy, it's because the value is wrong. And also, because you darken the color with an unrelated color. In other words, if I take a piece of red and darken it with black, which is unrelated, well, it may get a little muddy, but not so bad. So that's why we darken colors with related colors. Now, I see some new faces over here, and I recapitulate a bit some of this thing you've heard before. Now, in judging values, we use the Munsell color system. Munsell color system. Why do we use the Munsell color system? Because it's used by the United States government. It's official. And that's why we use it. In the Munsell color system, black is 0, which means the absence of light. And 10 is white. See, some people have it backwards. But the Munsell color system, 0 is black, which means the absence of light. And 10 is white. And here are the range of value that we use. Now again, I've said this before. Anybody who tells you to go outside and paint what you see is crazy. You can't paint what you see. You can't duplicate sunlight. If I take a piece of white paint, which is your highest value, 10 is your highest value, white is your highest value, and I take that white paint and put it against the sun, it looks black. So how the hell can you paint what you see outside? The scale of values is so enormous and so stupendous that we only have 10 values, 10 small values here. And with these 10 small values, we have to give an illusion of sunlight, brilliancy, a cloudy day, and it can be done. But you have to work within a circumscribed, limited formula. Because you cannot duplicate sunlight. It's impossible. I can't even duplicate that light over here. Take a piece of white paint and put it up there, and it's black. So you can't go outside and paint what you see. Okay? All right. Now, people speak of technique and style, you know, being a colorist and this and so forth and all that. Style technique is a result. Your style is a result. And it's not a conscious effort to try to develop a gimmicky style. You develop an original style as a result of knowledge, of tone, color, and form. After you have a knowledge of tone, color, and form, then you develop an individual style. But this is a result, and not a conscious effort on your part to say, I'm going to paint this style, I'm going to paint that style. You don't know what style you're going to paint, because you still don't know yourself. You have to discover yourself, what kind of a person you are. And one day you will wake up and know who you are, and your style will be there. And until you know who you are, you won't have any style. And that is a result. Style is a result. Okay? All right. Now, you can interrupt me and ask questions at any time if something is not clear. Now, color is light. White color is light. All the color you see is in the light. Now, the reason that this is red is because as the light strikes it, this object absorbs all the colors of the light except red. It doesn't absorb red, and it reflects it. But it absorbs all the colors of the light, and it only reflects them. This black object absorbs all the colors of the light. Black absorbs all the color of the light. See? Don't forget, these objects absorb light. They absorb light, and that's what you have color. Now, you have selective absorption. A blue object will absorb everything except blue, and it reflects blue. A white sheet reflects all the colors of light. Without light, you wouldn't have color. So, all the color that you see is in the light, and is absorbed by objects and reflected in return. And unfortunately, we see only 20% of color. There's an 80% that we don't even know exists. Maybe some animals see them, but we don't see them. We only see 20% of light to begin with, of color. All right, now, how do we know?
By the same philosophy, what is black? Black absorbs all the
It absorbs everything.
everything.
Yeah. That's why black is warm. Black is considered a warm absence of color. It's warm. That's why a dark suit is very hot, because it absorbs everything. A white suit reflects light and it's cooler. That's why in the tropics you wear a white suit and not a dark suit.
But is black considered to be a warm color?
Well, it's not a color. Actually, it's the absence of light, and hence the absence of color. But it's considered warm because it absorbs everything. Incidentally, black has an after image too, if you look at it. It has an after image. I'll go to that later. Now, how do we know that light is color? If you take a prism, as Sir Isaac Newton did, he took a prism and he broke the light and he got a series of colors. Right? Do I have to draw that, or is that clear? See? All right? What? Yeah. Can you see all these colors? All right. This is called, so, all right, now, light, objects absorb color, and light hits color, hits an object in a couple of ways. Say this is the sun. This is a tree. when light hits an object, the light is either absorbed by the object or deflected. Now, and listen very carefully, this is very important. Let's say I have a red apple. The light is hitting it. It's absorbed all the colors except the red. So the red comes out. Also, part of the light hits it in a certain way where the light is not absorbed. And so what you have reflected from the red apple is white light. Now, did you ever see a red apple and when you have a strong light on it, it's white? Did you ever see a black automobile outside and the light hits it and you see a white spot, a highlight, a white highlight? That means that part of the light has not been absorbed. And that's called specular light, which comes from the Latin speculum, which means mirror. Speculum means mirror. And this is called specular light. Specular light. Specular light. A mirror is the best example of specular light. A mirror, you don't see the surface anymore. Specular light is pure white. Now, here's the sun shining. There's a tree. When you look at the tree, you see the local value of the leaf, which is green. That's the local color. Then when the leaf hits against the sun, you get transmitted light. Now, you know what transmitted light is? You have a translucent object, and the light shines through it. That's called transmitted light. And transmitted light, the best example is a stained glass window. That's transmitted light. So, when you look at a tree, you see the local color of the leaf, which is green, and you also see the transmitted light, and you also see edges of the leaf with specular light, which is pure white. Pure white. Sometimes the whole leaf will be pure white, or sometimes the edge of the leaf will be pure white. So it's perfectly advisable and permissible in doing a tree to put spots of pure white, because that is known as specular light, and it's true to nature. Just about the same thing. Except that specular light is always the color of the light. Yeah, the light.
The yellow light, yellow.
The color of the light, that's the closest. But legitimate specular light is pure white. Because the way the light hits the leaf, you get that effect. Now, you can get a red apple, an absolutely red apple, absolutely red, and there'd be a spot of it which is absolutely white. You get a green object, and there'll be a spot of it absolutely white. That's called specular. It comes from the Latin speculum, which means what? Mirror. Any questions on that?
Is there any reason why, scientific reason why the light has been absorbed?
I suppose there is, because it may hit at a certain angle. I don't know. But there's a reason, you see. Now, part of the light is absorbed, and that gives you the color of the object. No, that's when you break up the light in the prism. You
but
break it.
Reflected light.
Oh, reflected light. I'll come into that. And that comes from different words. Now, now, this can be used arbitrarily. In which you have a lack of interest in a painting. The painting is dead. It's not alive enough. And you can use this principle of specular light to put pure white, touches of pure white. It can be put on the forehead of an individual. It can be put on a painting. And Vermeer did that a great deal. Vermeer did that a great deal. Whether he was aware it was specular light, it looked good. And he did it. Any question on that?
Where else would you use it other than?
Anywhere.
Or else?
When you have a strong light, a strong effective light, can be used anywhere. Pure white. Could be used on a face anywhere. Pure white.
Do you have to use values next to it?
Well, naturally. I mean, there's got to be, not everything can be pure white. All right. You know what transmitted light is?
It goes through.
Yes, you can take a maple leaf and hold it against the sun. That's transmitted light. And it happens in trees. Sometimes the under part of the leaf has transmitted light, sometimes the top, sometimes you have specular light underneath the leaf, etc., etc., etc. And this can be used advantageously at your pleasure. Any questions? All right. Now, another reason why you can't paint outdoors is this, that your black paint, which is supposed to be the absence of light, already is receiving light. So, I mean, you don't get the dark if you get outdoors. If you look into a cavern, it's really dark, and you can't duplicate that. It's impossible. Because the black that you put in your painting, no matter how dark you make it, light is shining on it, so you can lose 40%. And even white light, white paint gives you only 42% of real light. 42%. Your white paint gives you only 42% of real light. So how the heck in God's name can you go outside and paint what you see? 42%. Another almost 60% left of white light, brilliancy, that you can't duplicate. So you can compete with nature, but you can suggest. And the note to take down is suggest. Give an illusion. You can only suggest, you can give an illusion. And as Degas said, I've said this before, Degas said, to make a good drawing of a good painting, you have to be a liar and a cheat and a con artist. Because you can only give an illusion of nature. Another note to put up, yes?
You said white paint reflects 42% light.
Yeah.
But that should mean that any light shining on the white paint will reflect only 42% of the actual light.
Right. I mean, that limits it enough. All right. Another note to take down is this, that pure colors are rarely found in nature. Pure colors are not found in nature. You don't get the idea that the sky is blue and that the grass is green. That's a lot of nonsense. All right, and there's another interesting point. A very interesting point. A red object does not only reflect red because it's absorbed everything. So look at this very interesting singular fact. It also reflects yellow red and red purple. It reflects its two adjacent colors. I'll repeat that again. That's very pretty. Red does not only reflect red, the object, but it reflects yellow, red, and red purple. If you look at this other chart, the adjacent colors, the two adjacent colors are also reflected. So there is no such thing as a red wall, a flat area of red. There ain't no such animal. If you put a flat area of red, you have to put yellow, red, and red purple in it somehow. This is scientific fact. That's the way the mouth lies. Take it or leave it. Adjacent colors are called analogous colors. Now the same thing with red. A yellow wall will reflect these two colors, adjacent colors. Yeah, yeah. Of course, the same value. See, in other words, if yellow is the 8th value, yellow red has to be the 8th value, and yellow green has to be the 8th value too. What? Yeah. Let's say yellow is the 8th value, right? Not only does it reflect yellow, but it reflects yellow, red, and yellow, green. And they all have to be the 8th value.
In other words, anything that is reflecting has to be the same value.
Yes. In other words, if the wall is a certain value, the colors reflected have to be a certain value. If the wall is the 8th value, the other colors. Again, this can be used tastefully and arbitrarily, depending on face. The face is pink. They have a yellowish pink, they have a little bit of red or purple, so forth. You take the adjacent colors and you mix it in the face, and you'll get a certain glow that you cannot get otherwise. Is that clear? This is a subtle point.
You have to use the same value.
Naturally,
Pink or the
I can't put a dot. See, if my side of the face is the 8th value, let's say, if this is the 8th value, all these colors are the 8th value. See? And let's say I want to put some movement here. Any color I put in there has to be the same value. Is that clear? Is that clear? Any question about that? I'm confused.
You want to use a little green and...
It's got to be the 8th value.
So be the 8th value.
Look, if my face here is the 8th value, the side of my face is the 8th value, and I want to put some yellow green in there, the yellow green has to be the 8th value too. It can be darker.
Is the reason for that the adjacent colors, one is warm and one is cool?
It's just that it has to do with after images too. We'll go to that later. Now, what? What paint? What painter? I mean, a specific painter. Yeah, I would say that Rembrandt is one. Dean Cornwell is another one. I mean, a modern Rembrandt is an old master. Dean Cornwell, Leonardo da Vinci to some extent was that, and Rubens. Rubens used that a great deal. Rubens. Now, it was done by instinct. Now we know this is a scientific fact. This is a scientific fact. These people did it by instinct, you know. Rubens did it and it looked good. So he told the student, hey, look what I've done that, you know, it looks pretty good, doesn't it? So, and that student handed it out to somebody else, and all the way down the line. But there's a scientific reason. This is inevitable. This will happen.
And aren't you doing that with the skin tone? You mix the skin tones because you have the orange and then the yellow you mix together, right?
To mix mixed together to some extent, but it's not quite the same. All right, now, any question on that?
Yes. When we worked last week on a black model, and I had to use a very dark color for the dark shadow. Is that the same diamond I was using as the typical diamonds?
I don't recall what you did.
I mean, which one used that?
No, there's a distinction between light and shadow. There's a distinction. Now, ask questions because
What would you mean by local color? So yellow, orange, so it's got another color.
yeah, a local color, see, especially if this light will reflect the adjacent colors. Let's say the local color is red. You're going to get red plus this and this, except on a cloudy day. On a cloudy day, local colors are predominant. Blue is blue, red is red, and green is green on a cloudy day. Now, outdoors, you have two sources of light. You have sunlight and skylight. You have to contend. Where the sun hits, you always get yellow because sunlight is yellow. If sunlight hits a red bar, you're going to get orange. You're going to get a mixture of orange. See, and on top of that, if skylight hits the shadow of the bar, you're going to get skylight. So you're going to get blue and violet. You're going to get blue in the shadow outdoors. See, that's why your shadows are cool outdoors and bluish. See? The only time that you get a pure, more or less pure local color is on a cloudy day, and that's how you paint a cloudy day. The local colors do not change. They're predominant. Local colors. Red is red, the green sweater is green, etc., etc., etc. And this is on a cloudy day. Otherwise, you're going to get adjacent reflections. It also reflects yellow, red, and yellow, green at the same time. Yeah. It gets more bluish. Yeah, because skylight is hitting. See, skylight is hitting the bar.
So if skylight hits the red line, does it put on a little bit of the adjacent color of
Yes.
the orange red? And
Yes,
the
yes. It has. And this can be used arbitrarily when you're doing a portrait, when you're doing an illustration, regardless of what you're doing. To jazz it up or to perk it up, you can use this, and it's the truth. It's the truth of nature. You can use it arbitrarily because it happens. Any question on that? That's inevitable. That is inevitable. See, and that's how to give a little color, a little flavor. Right? Now, this is based, I'm not used to recommend this book. And orange and green get yellowish in strong light.
colors tend to get more yellow and light.
in strong light
Yeah, and what?
and more
shadow.
violet in shadow. One second. I'll repeat all that again. Colors tend to be more yellow in strong light and more violet in shadow. Red gets orangey in the light. Strange as it may seem, orange and green get yellowish. Get yellowish in the light. Blue gets greener, and violet gets more blue. Blue gets greener, and violet gets more blue. See, in other words, if you have a violet shadow, as it goes towards the light, it gets more blue. There's a violet shadow on a tree, and it's going towards the light, it gets more blue. And then the blue gets greener as it gets towards the light. You see, there's a transition. Violet gets blue and blue gets greener. There's a transition, it's a gradation as you get into the light. What? Sure, because violet may be the third value, and blue may be the fourth value. I mean, and green can be some other higher value.
Are all these colors within themselves?
Yeah, they do have value. It's like, yeah, yellow, cadmium light is the ninth value. All these colors have certain value. Yeah.
Can all colors have all values?
Oh yes, you can make. Now, for instance, here's a tree. Here's a shadow, and it's violet. As it gets towards the light, it's going to get blue over here, and then it's going to get green over here. As it gets away. See? There's a gradation, there's a transition. And Maxfield Parrish was very good at this, Maxfield Parrish. He got a great deal of chroma and effect in his painting because of this understanding. No, it can't go backwards. See, if this is violet, as it goes towards the light, it gets blue, then it gets green. Yes, that's a good reason.
Why do they look good in the flowers? I mean, they're all different colors. And
Well, because of the harmonizing effect. I'll come to that. Don't worry. All right, now. As violet passes in, well, all right. See, as you get into the shadow, green gets bluer. Now, orange, as it goes into shadow, gets redder. That's a note to put down. Orange in shadow gets redder. Yeah.
Like a dark red?
Yeah. As a transition.
because they want this.
Yeah. All right, now. All right, now, colors of the night. At night, you get deep blue and violet. Just put it down. When the moon rises, there is usually a red low haze. A red low haze, H-A-T, when the moon is rising. Sky around the moon is graded from red to violet. Sky around the moon is graded from red to violet. And the shadow side of the foliage, a deep purple. If you have trees. Shadow side of the foliage, a deep purple. Sky around the moon is graded from red to violet. And the shadow In moisture, the light. In moisture, the light of the moon. Yeah. And as it becomes diffused, it gets greenish. The next one is a note to put down and underline. Three times. I'll read it slowly. I hope you understand it. Gradations of value and intensity. Gradations of value and intensity give vibrancy to color. Now what does that mean? Anybody? Well, I mean, we're more specific. You know what it means? Gradations of value means what? All right. And gradations of intensity, what means what? Chromatic intensity. From light chroma to strong chroma to weak chroma. Chroma means color. See, chromatic variation. Yeah. Now, if you knew values, you wouldn't ask that question. I'll answer it. Yeah, don't worry. Yeah, I'll answer it. A flat area of any color is dull. Yeah. A flat area of any color is dull. As soon as you vary the surface with gradations of value and intensity, the color becomes very alive. That's another note to put down. I'll repeat that again. A flat area of any color is dull. As soon as you vary the surface with the gradations of value and intensity, the color becomes alive. That means chromatic intensity, from strong to weak chroma, and also value gradations. You wonder why the thing looks dead? That's the reason.
As soon as you vary the surface of the...
What?
As soon as you vary the surface of the...
I'll repeat that again. A flat area of any color is dull. As soon as you vary the surface with gradations of value and intensity, the color becomes alive. Yes, that makes it more luminous. Also, that gives motion. It creates motion to it and movement to the painting. And gradations of value and chroma are found in nature. So it's perfectly all right for you to utilize it. Now, induced colors. You can make me see colors that don't exist. That's called induced colors. All you have to do is to put neutral grays next to a color. From which you can put a neutral gray next to red, the gray will look green. Even though it isn't green, you make me see green. Yes, the complementary color. See, a color throws its complement into the next color. If you put orange next to gray, it will look blue. Yeah, it will look blue. And that's why a lot of portrait painters, instead of putting blue for the eyes, put gray. And they look blue.
That's not so far much between this and green and orange. And you get a fix, it quickly cools out.
Yeah.
I don't understand that. I mean, they make the
Yes,
red
you're
eye
right.
orange.
You can paint the iris gray, and it will look blue.
Because
Especially if there's red with pink around it. See, and you think you're seeing blue and you're not. That's called induced color. Okay? Now, this gets a little more complicated. I'm just giving you the highlights. Okay? Again, I mentioned to you that the gradation of color and the gradation of intensity is very, very critical. See? Gradation and intensity is what curves out the lines, curves enhance line. It's very critical. I hope you understand that. And that's why, and I hate to repeat this, by God, I'm going to repeat it in a loud voice. That's why we have 876 in the damn light. Because of gradation of intensity and value, color. That's why writers make you put the 876 in the goddamn light instead of just one value. And everybody seems to lose sight of that fact. And I've repeated this till I'm hoarse. Gradation in the light, value and intensity, gradation. And even when you draw with the pencil, gradation in the line. That's the reason. All right, enough of that. Get it off my chest. And if you don't do it, Jeannie, you'll be the recipient of inconceivable agonies and unspeakable agonies.
When you talk about gradation of intensity, is it about same color?
It's weak, you see, when I speak of intensity of chroma, I mean weak chroma, strong chroma. In other words, let's say we get a red. You can gray it.
Oh.
See? That's a gradation of intensity and also gradation of value. It gives movement and it gives action. It moves. See? It's a very fundamental aspect. It's very critical. And everybody overlooks it. See, I speak 876, the effect, and the other, that's the reason. That's the example. Let's see.
What can it be 876 and let's say
There are, no, let me recapitulate this. Maybe it's a good point to, or bring a point across. If we get a sphere, right? This is the shadow, right? The shadow, let's say, is a third value. Your reflected light is a fourth value, and your half-tone is 5. This is a light. In this light, you got 8, 7, and 6 in that light. You've got 8, 7, and 6 in that light, and here you have a highlight, which can be 9. There are 3 values in the light. Because as I get away from the strongest light, it has to get imperceptibly darker. It has to. If you have one source of light. As I get away from the one source of light, it gets imperceptibly darker. It has to. So there are 3 values in the light. Any question on that? And that's why Lou, when he walks around, he says 876. Yeah, for that reason. Gray one? No, you can gray with the complementary. I'll come into that. There are 3 ways of graying a color. So, now this happens in nature. Again, this is repetitious. One color usually dominates, and it's supported by adjacent colors. You're painting a garden, you're painting foliage, you're painting landscape. There's a dominant reddish value. Put the adjacent colors next to it. Put the adjacent colors to them. You might put this down. Red reflects orange and violet on a side. Yellow reflects orange and green. Blue reflects green and violet. I'll start from the beginning. Red reflects orange and violet. Red. Yellow reflects orange and green. Blue reflects green and violet. And remember that great brilliancy of color is obtained by the use of the adjacent values reflected. Great brilliancy, and I mean the word great. Great brilliancy of color. If you want great brilliancy of color, you've got to use the adjacent values that are reflected. That's great brilliancy. Well, yes, yes. It's achieved. But you get red, and you reflect the yellow red and the red purple, you get great brilliancy of color. You want something highly chromatic and very in good taste, it happens in nature. See? And all this variation, gradations always suggest move. Move. You want it to move, gradation. Gradation will give you move. It's the same in drawing. Okay? Now you can copy this. Let's say that this is dark blue. And this is light blue. You got that? Light blue and dark blue, so you get a gradation, and it looks like a spin because it's gray, right? But it's monochromatic. Now, if I add green over here, and blue over here, and violet over here, it will look much more, not only chromatic, but more real. Just copy. See? It goes back to the saying that if this is violet, when you get into the light, you get into blue and you get into green. That's the same thing as I said before. See, violet is in shadow. As you get towards the light, it gets into blue, then it gets into green. Any questions? Just copy.
Both the violet and the dark blue is shadow.
Yeah. See, at first this was light blue and dark blue. But in the dark blue, I put violet. And then as I get towards the light, I put blue. And as I get towards the light, I put green. See? And it will look more natural and more real. Yeah. get to experiment. I can't cover that now. You see, Rod used to give these notes, and then 3 months later, give one example in color. Then a year later, another example in color, because you got to work it out yourself. And he will give you intermittent examples. Okay. There are 3 ways of grading a color. Put this down. Yeah, graying it. You can gray a color by using these neutral grays, as we do. You can gray a color by using neutral grays. Or you can gray a color with complementary. Just put that down. Color can be grayed with complementary. If I get red and I put green, it will be gray. And as strange as it may seem, you can gray it by these colors, the adjacent colors. There are 3 ways of doing it.
Does this contain the color perspective?
What?
This is a landscape. Let's say you have.
Yeah, in color perspective. Yeah, in the background it gets bluer and it gets more green. That's right. This can be used in color perspective, and aerial perspective too.
Do you have to use both adjacent colors?
Yes, like the gray. Use both adjacent colors to gray. That's right. Oops. Huh? On a side, you don't mix them together. Yeah. Yeah. In other words, if I have red, see, and then I put red purple next to it and I throw into it, see, and I grade into the color, it's one thing. But if I mix them together in a fire, with the palette knife, it's something else. Yeah.
This is not a reason, is it?
Huh?
Dark blue and then violet and mixed with the violet should be
Blue.
red, right?
Yeah. Well, just copy. I'll explain the detail of that. Just copy it. See, there's so much to cover. I don't want to. Yeah, but it gets lighter too. 3. 1 with the grays, and 3 with the adjacent colors. All right. And just halation. Halation or radiation. Or radiation. Radiation.
What was the first word? Elevation. Elevation. Like that, they had to be
Yeah. Now that's the color of the light source. It's coming in, it hits an object. It hits the object, and it goes into space. So the space next to the object has the color of the light source. Space next to the object has the color of the light source. If the light source is blue, the adjacent value next to the object is bluish and lighter. That's called halation.
You mean it's a blue light?
Yeah, it's a blue light. If it's a yellow light, it's yellow. If it's orange, it's yellow. It's called halation. Yeah, the color of the source of light hits an object, and then it skips into space ahead of the object. And that's why you see a blur around a candle. You see a candle flame, there's a blur around it. That's called halation. Because it goes into space. What? Yeah. Now, Michael is doing a figure out there with a head and light coming over here out there. Still that head of Charlie? The source of the light is halation around his head, which is going to be the same source of the color of the light. So it gets lighter over here than here. Okay. Source of light, and this gets all light around him. There's a halation around his head, and then there'll be a halation around the girl's head.
Color of the light?
Color of the light.
Or the color of the object?
The color of the light mixes with what's there. The color of the light. It's called halation. You see it around the candle, or you see it around a lamppost, around a brilliant light.
It's only at night.
It can happen anytime. Anytime during the day. It happens with the moon. You see a halo around the moon. See, and people use that around saints. They put a picture of a saint and put a halo around it. The same thing. What? Yeah, same thing. Absolutely. Any question on this? Just put it down. Take it for granted. You'll understand it very well. I'll exhaust you. But if I go into scientific explanation, it will be exhausting. You've exhausted already. All right. Now, if you have a yellow object here, and there's another object over here, if you take the yellow and put yellow green and yellow orange at the end over here, a little bit, it will give a glow to the whole area. Again, it's the adjacent value. See, those adjacent values are very critical. Yellow, orange, yellow, green, the adjacent value, and it will give a beautiful glow to the whole area of yellow. Whereas the yellow itself will look dull. Yes.
Is that where it goes to open pages if we yellow? Can you put that on the register, yellow, green?
Yes.
And it would make it
Luminous. Absolutely. It'll make it glow. Now, you've got to try these things out by yourself by taking